Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and today I have two important guests, Hillar Moore and Maida, whose messages about Afghan prosecutors are vital at this juncture as prosecutors are under attack by the Taliban and continue to be left behind in Afghanistan and under increasing duress. Hillar Moore is the district attorney for East Baton Rouge and has developed a reputation for fighting hard for victims, including those impacted by domestic abuse, fraternity hazing, and the rising opioid epidemic. As a member of the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, Hillar has been working on assisting Afghan prosecutors left behind after the withdrawal who have no access to the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program or the Special Immigrant Visa Program, despite having worked to instill the rule of law in support of U.S. operations in Afghanistan. Maida is a former Texas prosecutor who supported the Afghan legal system's growth between 2006 and 2013 on the ground and focused on Afghanistan policy at the U.S. Special Operations Command and later at Special Operations and Combating Terrorism at the Pentagon through 2019. In August of 2021, he supported the evacuation of an Afghan prosecutor with whom he worked and his family as well during the final days of the U.S. presence in Afghanistan. In December of 2021, he started a group that has grown to over 130 members from different nations who are trying to support legal pathways for justice sector officials seeking to leave Afghanistan. I'm so honored to have both of you here tonight. You have done incredible work supporting the people of Afghanistan, so thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So I have gone through my mind because you both have such different backgrounds, and I want to give everyone an idea of the importance of what we're working on today and then kind of go backwards. So to start out tonight, Hillar, I'd like you to talk about an event that you have coming up with the APA and the things that are at stake now that have led you to host this event and what you're hoping will happen as a result of it.
Yeah, Beth, so first of all, thanks for your efforts in the Afghan podcast. Incredible work that you've done for so long. And it's just, man, you've educated so many people. And Joe, hats off to you, dude. You're a stud. Been there, done that through all of the thick and thin of it as a prosecutor. And I can tell you the prosecutors in Baton Rouge and in Louisiana, hats off to you. It had to be an honor for you to do what you did. Like we serve victims here of violent crime, you went over and above doing what you're doing, and we truly respect what you did, and we can't tell you enough. But
thank you, sir.
So learning about what happened, we didn't learn about it till late. Like we thought everything was fine because no man left behind, no prosecutor left behind. Always our motto. That's America. That's America. I don't care if you're an R, a D, an I. No one gets left behind, and because you can't live if you leave someone behind. And because of the work that Joe and others done, we then learned through the APA that hey, we left a ton of people behind, promising them that we weren't going to. And these are the people that fought side by side with the soldiers on the battlefield, and then with the prosecuting soldiers in the courtroom, prosecuting and fighting the same folks in different battlegrounds, courtroom and battleground. And we promised them we were going to help them, and we did not. But for private work of folks that helped our interpreters, and now the hope that we can get our prosecutors back, we will not fulfill our obligations that I know my father, who landed on Iwo Jima, would never let this happen. And because of his legacy, I have to do what I have to do because it's the right thing to do. It's the American thing to do. And we are fighting we have identified 1,500 prosecutors and judges that have been left behind. We know where they are. 57 have been killed already. And they're now hiding out in Iraq and Pakistan. And they're being killed. They're being killed publicly. It's a shame, and we owe it to these people in this country to honor our commitment. And so we're trying to have a fundraiser. We will have a fundraiser in Baton Rouge, which is going to be a really good one. We expect to raise $200,000 to help in the rescue of these prosecutors, these heroes for us, and to bring them to safe ground in some country legally, not illegally, legally. and we know where they are, we know who they are, and we can have a great event with a lot of really good people. It is an American event, not a political event one way or the other, and it's September 26th, and we cannot wait to have this thing off the ground. It's going to be truly a good event.
I'm glad that you've found those people. I mean, they need your help, and I'm very excited. When I heard about this, I was really excited to hear that, not just that you're doing it, but also that word is going to get out to people. More people are going to hear about this and hopefully be motivated to help. But I want to now go back in time, right? Joe, you have been working on supporting the Afghan legal system since 2006. So what I would love to hear is what your efforts looked like in those times, so that we can understand what led up to now, what led up to Hillar and the APA having to have these events, and you having to create groups to support getting people out of Afghanistan. So can you take us back to your time in Afghanistan, what the legal system was doing that put them at risk, why the Taliban hate them, just the whole background. Basically just spill your entire brain about everything you've done in 45 minutes or less.
Okay, so that's a tall order. First of all, let me express my gratitude to both of you and respect for Mr. Moore in terms of really taking a national leadership role as a prosecutor to look after these other brother and sister prosecutors, because we just have not had this prominent of a voice, and I respect and appreciate that. Same with you, Beth, in terms of keeping this issue at the fore in your podcast. So I want to first address and kind of go off script here and say that I think for many of those of us who served in Afghanistan, every time that we receive a degree of thanks for our efforts, it produces a strong regret that right now what we're seeing is a very tragic situation. And this is not, as Mr. Moore said, a partisan issue. The events that led to this current situation are not solely tied to the evacuation in August of 21. I served in Afghanistan under 3 different presidents and 4 different administrations. And so I think it's important to recognize that the terrain in Afghanistan is a rough terrain. I want to dispel, first of all, a notion that maybe Afghans did not have a functioning legal system before the Soviets. So let's go back a little bit more and say that they did have a functioning legal system. They had a penal code of 1976 that had different culpable, and Mr. Moore knows this term, mens rea, right, culpable mental states. So there was some degree of sophistication there. Whenever we got there in 2006, we were part of the first tranche of attorneys to go out into the provinces from Kabul and expand the rule of law into the provinces. It was a rather ominous event that our shipping containers that we were supposed to be living in the province I was going to were actually hijacked by the Taliban. So there was a delay in us getting out there. What we found was a justice system that had the underpinnings of a lot of fairness and due process, but also a lot of problems. And so the first issue was building rule of law in terms of basically garnering the public's respect, like elected prosecutors like Mr. Moore and others in the United States have to do in order to govern, right? In order to enforce the law, they have to remain above corruption. They have to promote a good image to the public. So that's part of the counterinsurgency paradigm. I have a couple of slides. I can basically speak to the slides without displaying them. The counterinsurgency paradigm is shape, clear, hold, build, transfer. And so that was the NATO ISAF, International Security Assistance Force, doctrine that we were enforcing. In almost every aspect of that paradigm, there was a need for a prosecutor. So whenever we were going into and preparing for battles in Helmand, Afghanistan, in Kandahar, we would try to get the prosecutors to go out to the front, to be there working hand in glove with those who were prosecuting the insurgency from a military perspective, so that we would have a prosecution mechanism for detaining those individuals and having those individuals afforded some due process. And so that was the military side. Many of those individuals for the U.S. were arrested, detained, and went to the the Bagram facility there, the detention facility at Bagram. Individuals like Major General Pat Reiner, with whom I have the honor of working in this NATO group, he would work on those cases with Afghan prosecutors, directly prosecuting the insurgents who were wrapped up on the battlefield. So that's part of the shaping and the clearing, right? Clearing those areas. Then you go into the hold phase. And in the hold phase, that's where the civilian prosecutors, like Mr. Moore, those who are involved, as I say, they swam with the sharks, right? They weren't working at a controlled access facility. They were among the populace. They had to face those defendants in court. They had to go home at night. They have to see their pictures in the news with respect to these prosecutions. That's a different segment of prosecutors who right now do not have a viable way forward as much as the military prosecutors, because the Department of Defense can write recommendations for those prosecutors who were working on the insurgent prosecutions directly. They were government officials, and I will tell you that the Department of Defense has a well-oiled machine in terms of getting those individuals into the P1 visa pipeline, okay? The State Department, on the other hand, unlike in Iraq, where DOJ, the Department of Justice, was responsible for leading the rule of law efforts in Afghanistan, I would imagine that the Justice Department attorneys were spread rather thin. In Afghanistan, the U.S. government took a different approach. That approach was using contractors through the State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, as it's called, INL. So, excuse me. INL hired contractors. As contractors, we and many other attorneys who served in my capacity, we cannot write the same letters of recommendation and sponsorship that the DOD individuals can do. So this is where we get this gaping hole in the ability, as Mr. Moore said, to leave no one behind. The State Department has had a heavy lift. Many of the individuals who got on those planes in those very dramatic moments, leaving Kabul whenever Kabul was falling and the U.S. was getting out, and we lost those 13 service members, a lot of those individuals did not really have any business getting on those planes. So the State Department has had the heavy lift of ferreting out who in those places where the planes took them, we call them lily pads now, but figuring out those individuals, vetting them, and they are finally now, after I think 2 or 3 years, getting to the point where they can focus on some of these other cases that deserve attention and that are being sponsored by different individuals. And the State Department has stepped up and started to categorically permit us to designate groups of individuals like prosecutors, and we've actually been able to get a few of the female prosecutors out of Afghanistan. There are two different programs, as we call them, very loosely. One is the Athena program for the female prosecutors. The other one is the Sentinel program for the male prosecutors. And so the State Department has increased the throughput of those cases, but they are not where they should be. And as I said in my congressional testimony, I'm not being critical of the State Department. I express gratitude for their efforts, but we need increased resources to focus these cases and increase the throughput. So I'll stop there for now.
So Beth, Joe's testimony and the others was incredible before Congress, and he just hit the nail on the head. It's very articulate as to the issues between those that serve the battlefield and the war crimes versus others, particularly domestic violence. And Joe will tell you that the United States government, when we instilled the rule of law there, we made 20% of the prosecutors and judges females. And that never has happened before. And those are the ones that are paying the brunt of the crime now, where they're finding these folks that are hiding out in Iraq and Pakistan where they're not really wanted. and they're killing the women, prosecutors and judges in front of their children, their family, and it's sad. So through the APA, we know where these folks are. They communicate with us all the time. They're really getting frustrated because we're trying to rescue them, and we can only rescue them legally and enter the border of some country legally. And a lot of politics with the southern border hangs us up on a lot of things. But this is a unique group, as Joe knows, of people that are extremely talented, speak the language, have worked hard to become lawyers. They know the language. And I think Joe probably also is aware, and you are, Beth, that once that last plane left, when people are falling off the wheels, you see the Taliban members going to the jail, not only at the airport, but other places, saying, your revenge on your prosecutor, hang the prosecutor, and here's the pictures, because we left all their biometrics and all their pictures and things behind. They knew who they are. And it's just a total shame that we cannot help these people with basic things that we promised. And when you watch those videos, you have to cringe and say, how can this happen? We must rescue them. They're frustrated right now in their emails and their messages to us. And we just have to and I just don't think Americans are aware. And I think that we're aware of this. They would want to come to their rescue.
I think that it's not as intuitive for Americans who didn't have to watch war for 20 years, right? You could go about your daily life for the 20 years of our war without knowing much about what was going on, and you could not see the headlines, and there were headlines. I put a couple of them into my Fox article, but they didn't, I think only one made the cut, but prosecutors and judges were being killed by the Taliban in the years before we left, and I wanted to ask you, Joe, did you see that personally? And that should have prepared us, just like I talk a lot with No One Left Behind. And they have been tracking the number of military interpreters who were killed in the years. I mean, that's how people, to apply for the special immigrant visa program, you have to be able to demonstrate that there was a threat to your life. And we knew that there was, because hundreds of interpreters had been murdered in the lead up to the withdrawal too. So you would think that those things would have prepared us. And I wondered, what's your thought on that, Joe? And did you see that when you were helping to build up that justice sector? And what was the response of Afghans who were part of that? Like, were they afraid of that, or were they just proud that they were supporting law and order?
So I will tell you that Afghans are some of the most fearless people that you will ever meet.
Yeah.
The Afghan with whom I was coordinating, and he wasn't just helping us with respect to the Taliban, helping us with respect to other regional issues. He was kidnapped and tortured whenever I was working with him. He was eventually released and went right back to work. This was in 2007, and he worked until the very last day he could. I mean, until the Taliban was flooding the streets. Other prosecutors, and the one who we were successful in getting out, the corruption prosecutor, had been contacting me for about 18 months prior to the fall of Kabul. This prosecutor never contacted me until the Taliban were in the streets, and then he wanted to get out. So there's a resiliency of character among these people that enabled us to do our mission, to do our military mission and advance U.S. national security and defense equities there. And without that resolve and without the courage of them doing what we were asking them to do, right? They were, in a sense, our proxies, our tip of the spear. And so I can report to you that they exhibited remarkable bravery. Many of them were killed. You're absolutely right. They used to attack the training centers. My Afghan legal counsel eventually was conducting training, and the classroom was attacked. Many of the students were killed, and he had to go and blend into a market. It was like something out of a James Bond movie or something, right? I mean, it's just horrifying. But these people believed in their country, and I will tell you, as I said in my congressional testimony, that in all of my years of having a clearance with the government, I never heard of one prosecutor ever perpetrating a green on blue attack, which is essentially attacking any of the international implementers or supporters or partners. So I feel like I can vouch for them with some degree of confidence. One of the aspects of my background, I used to work for the Reagan Justice Department on the Cuban Haitian entrance program. And as Mr. Moore said, I think that we need to draw some sharp lines between some of the illegal immigrants coming here and this particular population group, particularly of prosecutors and attorneys. This is a refined group, and I believe that they are a very low-risk, low-threat group, and perhaps the lowest risk of any of the groups categorically that I know of.
And, Beth, traveling to Turkey to meet with some former Afghan prime ministers, this country, although have been in war since Genghis Khan or whatever, these folks are committed to their country. They want their country back. They want these thugs out of their country, and they want to fight. So I think that we, as a country, despite leaving them and giving up really big air bases, which I'm not a military person, but it makes, I understand it. They want us back. They want us to help. And so it's kind of frustrating.
It is. And I can't remember which of you brought up the domestic violence courts, but Hillar, you and I had the opportunity with Kevin Reardon to speak with my friend. I'm going to use her pseudonym that she's used on the Afghanistan Project podcast before. She went by Amina, and she was in training to become a lawyer. She was apprenticing, and this part didn't make it into the Fox article because the Fox article was far too long. But she told us at the end of that call, and had the hairs on my arms raised, talking about a domestic violence case that she witnessed while apprenticing, where a man was his wife was seeking a divorce because he was abusing her, and he broke a glass cabinet and took the piece of glass and began to threaten the judge and the attorneys who were there. And that's something that they were dealing with too. It's not just narcotics trafficking and being part of a terrorist group, and it was also these social things where divorce was not considered okay, and it's not anymore. You can't get a divorce in Afghanistan, and all the previous divorces have been vacated. And so these people who were trying to save women from their domestic abusers are now possibly also being chased about by the domestic abusers. It's a culture war at some level too, and it's just I wish she could be here to tell that story herself right now, but there's so many people who were doing very brave things, and we don't have to think about how brave they are. Although, Hillar, you do it every day in your work too, dealing with domestic abuse, and here it's
big issues, and that lady was powerful. But just to think about what women go through, what we gave to them for 20 years, how we elevated them for 20 years, and now that when the Taliban came back, they said, hey, we're all different. We're a kinder, gentler Taliban. Well, look at the country, look at the stories. That's just not happening. They're not allowed to do anything anymore. It's sad. This should gather the attention of the entire world that women in Afghanistan can't do anything past the 6th grade, I think. And they were so well-educated women. They strived to be educated, became lawyers, judges. They're still learning. Those that have made it out in the United States are doing incredible work, particularly the judges and the prosecutors that we know of. And I would love to have some here to have them. They speak English. I'd love to have them as prosecutors in domestic violence courts here, because they understand the system. And again, just a lot of will, a lot of fortitude for this group of people that have been in a very difficult situation for hundreds and hundreds of years, not to mention the last 23.
So what I would love to do, Joe, if you have anything else you want to talk about from your past of, your efforts to help that system thrive, I would love to hear it. But if you'd rather move on, we can get to the withdrawal. I'm going to leave that in your court.
Yeah, Beth, I think I've painted a picture, at least of my experience, and I just can't emphasize enough how integral these prosecutors were to our overall mission.
Absolutely. So then during the withdrawal, can you talk about your efforts to help the prosecutor that you knew and how that kind of carried forward into your work in December to create that group?
Yes, so this particular prosecutor, we were living on a compound in the desert, and it was covered in rocks, and it was a very austere environment. The students would be coming to and from the class in buses, and we would have to maintain awareness of the intelligence on a daily basis in terms of the road going in and out of the compound where we had our classroom. Because if there was a bomb threat, as the team lead, I would have to make a decision whether to cancel class. It was that dangerous. Lots of IEDs and explosions on this road. This particular prosecutor was a corruption prosecutor. In every single time, we would have guest lecturers come in and try to take the doctrine that we were teaching the students, the curriculum that we wrote, and then making that doctrine applicable and applying it to their everyday work, right? So we would sometimes cross-pollinate and get individuals in leadership positions from the prosecution office to come in and give a lecture, and then we would have conversations with them to try to make it practical. So every single time this guy showed up, he had this beaming smile on his face, and was just absolutely full of energy, and frankly, he inspired me. As it was becoming clear that the U.S. was leaving Afghanistan, and for those of us who knew Afghanistan, the fall of the government was not a tremendous surprise, and I hate to say that, but I think a lot of people saw the writing on the wall in the year or so preceding the withdrawal. So this individual began to contact me, and he had his family in California, so they were serving as intermediaries. And I kept saying, I can't help you, I can't help you, I can't help you. Well, we started to get involved. His daughter in the U.S. started to tweet to different senators and really build like this grassroots coalition of people in power to try to advocate right. So she self-helped and really made my job a lot easier. So I was in Afghanistan. I mean, I'm sorry, I was in D.C. He was in Afghanistan, and so I started calling different people who I knew who I thought might still be influential in that process. It so happened a Marine JAG who took my place at NATO headquarters was in Rome, and he was facilitating the evacuation on behalf of the Holy See of nuns who were running an orphanage for retarded or disabled children. So he was in touch with people who were behind the wall there at Kabul Airport, at KIA, right? So it was this nerve-wracking, painful experience. And I was looking at some of the previous text today where these people, whenever I say these people, I mean folks like myself who were trying to get people out, we wouldn't sleep but 2 hours or maybe 30 minutes for an entire day. And that went on for some of us, 2 weeks. So eventually we were able to get in touch with people on the inside who were able to go and pick these people up and then take them out. And I shared with you, Beth, and Mr. Moore, the video that they had made, but it's just, it's absolutely dramatic and fantastic what occurred. And now they're in California, and they're abundantly grateful to us for what we did, but also grateful to the United States and grateful to our country.
It's always good to have a good news story, but obviously after that, there were less good news stories, or at least enough stories that motivated you in December. And I remember those months. I often talk here about how I did not have contacts on the ground or access to signal groups or anything like that in August. And I only had a few people coming to me for help in August. And I literally had nowhere to send them, but I started getting involved in efforts in about November. And so I remember December of 2021 very well. And just it was the last ditch overland route. Is there anything at Mez going out? What was it that compelled you in December to get a group together, and what was the initial goal of that?
Thanks for reorienting me to the original question, Beth. That's why you're a pro, right? I appreciate that. So whenever we had all of those lines of communication with different people who were also trying to get individuals out, U.S. citizens, then there were two families that I was trying to get out. One of those was the individual who had been kidnapped and tortured whenever I was working with him, the one I described, who stood by his post till the very end. The other was a sibling family, and I have to be very careful because I don't want to identify them, but a sibling family, and they were involved in women's rights. And the female, the wife is an attorney as well. She used to defend little girls for running away from home, because even though the U.S. came in and was attempting to change the ethos of the legal system to one that was more friendly toward women's rights, as Mr. Moore says, there was resistance, and there was some of the imposition of the Sharia law. So we were trying to temper our approach without being too radical in terms of our changes. So those two families then contacted me once the Taliban were in the streets, and I could not. They were told to stay in place for 3 weeks, that they were going to be picked up, like the other family I'd mentioned before, but they were never picked up. They were left. So then, after the withdrawal, and I'll underscore again that the withdrawal itself was not the direct cause of the situation that we're talking about now, right? This is a culmination of decades of frankly shortcomings by people like myself. We failed to produce a sufficiently sustainable government, or our collective efforts failed. So we stayed in touch with those individuals, and everybody basically who was involved. A number of people dropped off, but a number of people continued to maintain fidelity of word to the people we were trying to help. And this group has grown over the years, and now it's over 130 people from different countries helping the prosecutors who supported the NATO mission. And I will tell you that these people have my absolute respect and admiration for their attentiveness. I can drop a question, for example, whenever I was preparing for my comments this evening, I drop a question in a chat, and I've got the answer to my question from 5 different people within a matter of an hour, right? I mean, that's how dialed in these people continue to be. And then we have groups like the Jewish Humanitarian Response, Caroline Marks. Now, just think about this. How beautiful is it, a statement on human character and nature, that we have is polarized as the Jewish Islamic debate is, but we have a Jewish organization who is helping people of the Islamic faith escape Islamic fundamentalism. I mean, that's a beautiful story in and of itself, right? So you get to see in this group a lot of the best side of human character and nature, and just the resolve and courage and determination these people have.
Trying to joke, and I know that you would consider yourself an ordinary person, but for us, you're extraordinary And I really do believe now, getting into this, we have so many Americans that would be like you, that would want to support this and would want to get into this, but they just don't know, because we really don't know. And yeah, I think it's outstanding that the Jewish humanitarian relief folks are helping another group of folks that are not necessarily aligned with them. And I know they're helping us with the APA. But to me, it's just the character of the United States. If more people knew about this, they would be appalled, regardless of RDI, and want to be involved. And I think hopefully things like this, the podcast, and hopefully the fundraiser will bring more attention, because we owe it to these people just as regular folks, and they just want to live in peace, like all of us want to live in peace. And as prosecutors, you want to help people in your community live in peace. Even in the United States, we have our own tough times, but we still owe it to other countries like this. And just, again, hats off to you, man, and the group, and all those dudes that served in our government that have come back. And these are tremendous, ordinary people that do extraordinary things. And when I see them, man, I feel just invigorated again, like I want to go do more work. But man, thanks for what you did. Outstanding.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moore, for everything that you're doing. And this is really an integrated approach, right? I mean, it should be a seamless effort where there's engagement with the State Department. There's advocacy for conditioning the relief that we give to the Taliban through those channels, right? Because a lot of these people are starving. And 501c3s and vets who are able to contribute are paying $135 a month to keep a lot of these mouths fed and these people alive. So we need to focus on that piece, and we need to focus on the safe and legal egress out of Afghanistan through some of these countries like Pakistan. And then, where Mr. Moore and others fit in, not only in terms of the advocacy, and the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys has started to engage as well with elected officials, with the National Security Council, but then there's the support that comes through organizations like the Welcome Corps, so that there's a soft landing, right, once they get to the U.S., and there is some degree of financial support for them to transition into productive citizens.
And Joe, when we're talking about a very small, finite group of folks that may eventually come to the United States versus the thousands and tens of thousands that come here illegally. And that's my hard part to understand, why we have already identified these folks. Why can't we really make a path for these folks quickly that are coming in legally? It's hard to comprehend.
Well, I would like to share something that I reached out to some of my contacts, and one of them sent me a Voice of America article published just this month through Reuters, and it talks about this Venezuelan program that allows up to 30,000 people in the United States each month from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela if they have sponsors and meet other conditions. Sponsors must be in the U.S. legally and have sufficient financial resources to support the person they are sponsoring for the duration of the stay. So we have that paralleled in some of the programs like the Welcome Corps and others who are able to sponsor. But listen to this. So as of June 30th, some 495,000 people from those nations had entered the United States under the program, which began for Venezuelans in 2022 and the others in 2023, according to DHS statistics. So if we can do it for all of those individuals who frankly did not fight with us hand in glove in Afghanistan, we ought to be able to do it for our people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and you see what happens too. I don't think a lot of people see this. In fact, it's been hard for me to get a grasp on it, because I don't think Border Patrol wants to talk about it necessarily very much. There are many Afghans coming to our border every year, and some of them are people who got frustrated waiting on an SIV and wondering if the Taliban was going to come to their door and kill them, or kill their child in front of them, or take their child's hand off in front of them, which is something I've seen horrifying pictures of. And they came to our southern border. And if what I've discerned is that if a family does that, they tend to be given, here's your date to appear in court and defend yourself against deportation. But if it's a single male, even if they have eligibility for SIV, they are often sent to an ICE facility and then prosecuted to whatever extent of the law the Border Patrol feel like charging them with. In fact, I talked to one gentleman for a Washington Examiner article about the 3-year anniversary who had 3 individuals who came in at, I think it was the Del Rio maybe border crossing, who were charged with a crime that gave them double the usual length of a sentence given to somebody who crosses the border for the first time. And so that's something that I don't think is getting very much. There were a couple big stories years ago, but it's continuing. And, I don't know how I would deal with the situation if I felt like my life were in danger. In fact, I know a woman right now who was, she was forced into marriage as a child and did receive separation from her husband under the former government. And now her husband, since the fall, has been trying to find her daughter to marry her daughter off to the Taliban. She said, absolutely not. I'm not going to get my daughter will not have the same fate I do. And she's been going between countries, neighboring countries, trying to stay safe and away from him. And she finally got a Brazil visa. And that's, for those who don't know, that is the typical path that an Afghan will travel to get to the southern border. They get a humanitarian visa to Brazil, and then they make that arduous, very dangerous trip up to the border. And I said to her, I just hope, I usually tell people, just don't do it. Just don't do it. And I did say that, but then I just said, you know what dangers you're going to face, right? And it was so heartbreaking. So there's just so much wrapped up in this. There's so much pain. There are so many people trying so many different ways. And I appreciate what you said earlier, Joe. You have to appreciate the efforts that the State Department has made. And some of it is resourcing and the inability to do certain things. But 3 years on, it just feels really difficult to keep telling people to wait and to see the pain. Hi, everyone, and welcome to post-production. I had, in this segment that I have now scrubbed out, said that Caroline Marks had told me about a woman who, when in Pakistan, had lost a child to miscarriage. And in fact, the woman lost the child shortly after it was born, and the child was buried in Pakistan. And I think it's important to correct that record and just make sure that the facts are right, because that is someone's life story. Once she leaves, she won't be able to visit that child that she lost. There are just so many heartbreaks that Afghans have had to face. And that's why I applaud you guys for staying in that fight. It's not easy. And I wanted to ask you, Hillar, what was it that drew you into this? Because it's not, you don't just wake up and go, oh, Afghanistan. What was the story that brought you in or that moved you to do it?
I think it's just my family history, and then hearing the story that we really left interpreters behind. I coached baseball for a long time, and I had a young man graduated from the military academy, went overseas to Afghanistan, led a group. He told me about his interpreter. His interpreter saved his life and other lives, and that he came back and his interpreter was left behind. And I didn't know a whole lot about it back then. And then all of a sudden, when we withdrew, saw the pictures, and then learned about the plight of these folks and called him and spoke to him, and just learned a whole lot. And just when my dad always talked about no man left behind, it's just the motto, and it was ingrained in our family. And then thinking about the juxtaposition of interpreters and military, but also the same folks that the military folks dealt with on the battlefield. These guys, Joe and his group, they're dealing with the same group in court. To give them the justice system to put them in jail from the work that they did. But because of the way they were paid, they were left behind. It's just not right. You can't sleep, you can't live. as a true American citizen for that. And again, I really think that we have overwhelming amount of majority of Americans that, if they knew about this, would want to fight, would want to work. And man, I'm just so honored and humbled to be with you guys here today, and I'm invigorated to go start again on some more stuff, and I cannot wait to get started on more. And Joe, thank you so much, and Beth, man, you unbelievable stories that I've heard. Mad, pissed, happy, sad. Man, I've heard some of your soldiers. It's just unbelievable what regular American young kids do. And we hear about so much about how bad the country may be or what our young folks are doing. When you hear and see these young kids, it's like, let's go. We're on. We got the kids to do it. We just have to get out of the funk we're in, and we got the folks to do it. I'm proud.
I think it's getting out of your comfort zone and what everybody's, especially right now. I'm watching, I was all into my political encampment before Afghanistan fell. Yeah. And the best thing that Afghanistan did for my life is pull me out of that and make me remember that humans are everywhere, all across the political spectrum and off it. And, you know, to get to meet just heroes who beforehand, Amy Sins comes to mind just because you're in Baton Rouge and she's in New Orleans, and she, you know, Amy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm fighting for my dad. I'm fighting for my dad's grandfather, both Marines. I know exactly what they did because they told me in such a way they were surely not proud to say much. They were very quiet, but that's what made them what they made them. And although I have not had the honor to serve in a military capacity, I feel I'm fighting the war in the streets here, and I want to keep that commitment up for America and for my children and my children's children to say this is our country, and we deserve to have the best, and we also deserve to help others. And again, this has been a great night. I really appreciate you allowing me to be here with Joe.
Oh, it's an honor, and I'm really excited for your event, and I hope that it gets other individuals involved in the fundraising effort. I want to give you guys each the opportunity, if there's anything that you want to say that I haven't asked about, if you want to plug any groups or get anyone, you know, tell them how to get involved with your groups, please feel free to share. Joe, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So, you know, I think that the efforts that are ongoing that Mr. Moore and others are doing to try to get some funding for this, that is going to help. And I think giving to the right people is important. And so I don't know of any more trusted organization than one that's overseen by prosecutors, right? So I would encourage people to support Mr. Moore. I wish I could go to the fundraiser. I love Louisiana. I love everything about it. I love the drinks, the food, and everything else. Wish I could be there.
We'll give you a ticket, Joe. We'll get you here.
I did. Mr. Moore brought up the servicemen and women, and you know, they say that the World War II generation is the greatest generation, but I will tell you that I can't imagine them having exhibited any more courage than what I saw from our fighting men and women in Afghanistan, who, it wasn't just storming the beaches, right? Not to minimize that, but these people had to go over there in successive deployments over a period of 20 years. And I think that we need to be mindful of the burden that the veterans are carrying in terms of the, as they say, the moral injury and the suicide rate. We need to pay attention to these veterans. We owe them a debt. And I'll say one other thing. It was asked in front of the Congressional Committee, and the question from one of the congressmen was something to the effect of, should we not get involved in any more conflicts or wars as the United States based upon this particular outcome in Afghanistan? And all I will say is that I pity the country that draws any conclusions about the ability of the U.S. military to protect our national security based on the outcome in Afghanistan. It was a counterinsurgency. The U.S. troops were not directly involved in being able to command the military effort, command and control. It was leading from behind, not to diminish the Afghan soldiers, but I think we need to encourage our military men and women to hold their heads up high coming out of this, because this is not a reflection upon their efforts.
Yeah, Beth, I mean, Joe, that is the point. So we want to make it clear, I know Joe would say the same, that this was, people have characterized this as the military lost this battle. The military did not. Our troops won this. They did exactly what they were asked to do, and these are more political decisions than military. And to any military serviceman that served in any kind of capacity, we appreciate what you did. You did your job. You won. You won the battle. We eventually decided to withdraw. And so please don't be discouraged. I know that as a troop and as a man or woman soldier, you probably feel bad that you left as you did, but you did what you were supposed to do, and you are a winner. You did not lose anything, and we look up to you. We want to honor your work now, and hopefully we can continue to honor you in the future. And with the help of everyone, we're going to get everyone back that we promised. No man or woman left behind. And we want to continue that effort. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm invigorated as an American to meet these people, even virtually, and to hear the stories are incredible. And I'm still hopeful for America.
I think I want to make one last comment because when I had you and Kevin talk with me for the Fox article, Hillar, I think it's really important that people understand Afghans aren't looking to come here just because they want a free ride to the U.S. I don't think I've met a single Afghan for whom that was their goal. Afghans love their country, and they just can't live in it right now safely because the Taliban are not letting them do that. And so I really encourage people, when you're thinking about Afghan refugees, they may be here only for a few years, and I guarantee you in those years they will add to this country and enrich it greatly. And we will be blessed by that effort. I mean, the Afghan sense of community is something we could all do to take on a little bit, I think, and their friendliness and care for others. There's a lot we can learn from Afghans. But the big thing is that they want to see their country not under Taliban rule. And we've trained these people well to be able to do their jobs when the Taliban eventually go away. And I would be happy to have Afghans come here forever too. But, I just want to make that clear to people. I've met lots of Americans who might not have the understanding of what really Afghans are looking for. So I appreciate both of you coming on today. This was an incredible learning experience, and I feel invigorated too. So thank you for joining me. I want to, before we close, put out my perpetual call to Afghan listeners that we're always looking to tell your stories. So if you have anything to share about 20 years of war, or the withdrawal period, or right now in the Taliban's takeover, we want to share your stories. So send anything you'd like to the Afghanistan Project Podcast at gmail.com, and I can promise that you will remain anonymous if you want to do so. Before we close out, I want to read a letter from a gentleman who sent me his story over social media, and I think it's really important. It's a rather long one. Buckle in, and thanks for giving it your attention. My name is Hassan, and I am from Afghanistan. I served as a military officer and student pilot in the Afghan Air Force. Dear Beth, I'm very grateful for you taking the time to learn about our situation, including our challenges and dangers. Thank you for voicing our concerns through the media to leadership and military personnel of the United States. Firstly, we trained the young officers at the Air Academy through 2 international American companies, Raytheon and PAE, with the support of 40 American instructors in various fields, including English, maintenance, aviation, and other branches of the Air Force. We were responsible for the security of Afghanistan and played a significant role in its defense. Together with the United States, we conducted joint operations to combat terrorism. Following the fall of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, many Afghan professionals were left behind during the evacuation process. This situation reflects the betrayal and negligence of the General Commander of the Afghan Air Force toward Air Force personnel. I want to be clear that some pilots, maintainers, and other professional employees traveled to to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan in order to reach the U.S. The remaining professionals were part of the initial group designated for evacuation. The U.S. military had a plan in place to safely transfer them to the U.S. during the evacuation process. The U.S. military and evacuation authorities informed the general commander of the Afghan Air Force that they would assist in evacuating the personnel. They advised him to remain at the airbase to manage his employees and facilitate their transfer to the airport. The U.S. government also provided cash assistance to support these employees. Regrettably, lacking patience, this individual boarded the first evacuation flight and misappropriated the funds that were given to him. As an eyewitness, I want to share that when we were informed that our commander was missing, we all began to wait like lost birds at the gates of Kabul airport, hoping to enter the airfield. We waited there for days and nights, making several attempts to reach out to our American instructors and advisors. They informed us that they would provide us with recommendation letters, hoping these would assist us in gaining access to the airfield. We followed their instructions at the gates, but unfortunately the letters didn't help. I contacted 2 of my teachers along with another advisor and made another request for assistance. They worked diligently on our behalf, but unfortunately they were unable to secure our entry into the airport. We are deeply disappointed that we could not find anyone willing to assist us. We have been left behind. We were left in an uncertain and perilous situation in Afghanistan. Every moment felt terrifying and horrific. Some of us were imprisoned by the Taliban and subjected to severe torture. Personally, I was arrested a year and a half ago under the pretense of possession of a firearm. They demanded the gun that had been issued to me during my service in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. I endured various forms of torture, including electric shocks, and I had my nose broken. They taunted me with phrases like, "You are slaves of disbelief, and we will kill you." I was held in prison for 3 months, where I was mistreated, leading to confusion and deep emotional scars. I lost all hope for my survival. Fortunately, my family supported me, and I was eventually released on bail and guarantees. After some time, the Taliban approached me and demanded that I join their Air Force. I did not accept their request. I changed my phone numbers and contacts and relocated to a different area. Even now, I'm not safe, as they are searching for me. I currently live in another province, secretly and in fear. Most of our friends who are not aligned with the Taliban are facing security issues like mine. We live under difficult conditions. We cannot work or fulfill our duties, and we cannot live freely. Severe economic problems are affecting us, and many of us are suffering from mental health issues. I, Asan, respectfully request that the leadership of the United States and the Department of Defense expedite our immigration process, including our P1 cases. We urgently seek to leave Afghanistan as soon as possible to secure a safe and peaceful life in America. I am very grateful to our senior teacher who has worked tirelessly for us. He has advanced the issue of our immigration and has put aside his work, personal life, and well-being to save us from this dire situation. He is fighting exceptionally hard for us. I urge the American government to recognize him for his invaluable support. Additionally, it is crucial to note that some of our fellow pilots, maintainers, and other professional officers have been left behind and have not been included in the P1 program. I hope the U.S. government and the U.S. Department of Defense will consider our friends for referral into the P1 program. I am prepared to introduce the pilots, maintainers, and other professional officers of the Afghan Air Force who are in danger to the U.S. Department of Defense so they can be referred to the P1 program. I remain in contact with all my friends and have their documents ready. If given the opportunity, I would be honored to share all of their essential information with you. Best regards, Asan. Thank you for sharing that, Asan, and my heart goes out to you for having endured everything that you went through, especially because of an act of cowardice by someone who should have stood by and helped those that he was in charge of. So I can't thank you enough, and I will do everything I can to get the word that you've shared here out to those audiences. I'd also like to thank our listeners for just sharing their time, for supporting the people of Afghanistan, for listening to you guys who are doing, like I said before, amazing work to help individuals who, most of whom you do not even know. If you've enjoyed the episode, follow the YouTube page, enable notifications, and that way you'll hear about all our future episodes. Again, thank you both so much for coming on tonight.
Pleasure.
Great to be with you.
Thank you. Good to see you,
I
Joe.
learned a lot. Tasha Kaur to everyone, and hope to see you again soon.